thank you for joining. Right, just click on that. So thank you for joining the fifth of our sessions in the Aspiration, Inspiration, Perspiration programme of events. And this session, the topic that we're covering is the vagaries and virtues of ABCD. ABCD standing, for, of course, for asset-based community development. My name is Sue Denman. I'm from Together for Change. And I'm actually standing in, giving this introduction on behalf of Sue Leonard from the Pembrokeshire Association of Voluntary Services, PAVS, because Sue sadly has some internet problems, but we are hoping that she's going to join us a little bit later. Now, Together for Change and PAVS were commissioned by the Resourceful Communities Partnership to curate these events. And I must highlight that the funder of the events is Social Care Wales. So it's been very, very much a team effort to put this programme together. And there are, I think, over 10 events altogether, 10 sessions spanning 3 months, finishing at the end of June. So do look out for some of the other things that we're putting on. But first, for some housekeeping arrangements, the session is going to be 90 minutes long maximum. It will be recorded, as you've seen, Kelly has already pressed the record button. And could I ask you, please, to mute your microphones, unless, of course, you're contributing to the discussion or asking questions. And of course, if your preference is to use the chat functions, then do that, please. So I want to turn to our session, which has got a very, very intriguing title, and to introduce Dave Horton to you. Now, Dave, I'm sure will be known to many of you. He has been working in community development for some 25 years, which is absolutely phenomenal, brings massive experience to the subject area. He plays a key role and has played in ACE in Ely, and he specialises in ABCD and co-production, and is particularly interested in bringing those approaches to people power. So bringing that approach so that communities lead and participate fully in the policies that affect them. Now, it's not in his formal bio, but Dave also undertakes training and some general consultancy work with other organisations. And I can vouch for the fact that he's absolutely great to work with, because Together for Change does a lot with him. So without any further delay, I'd like to hand over to Dave, who will be running this session right up to the last few minutes when I will be giving some closing remarks. So Dave, over to you. Welcome.
Thank you, Sue, and lovely to be here with you all this afternoon. Very grateful that you've come in from the sun that we've finally got. Certainly in Cardiff, it's very sunny today. I don't know if I'm here to bring the aspiration, inspiration, or perspiration, but I suspect there might be a bit of all three of those things as the session progresses. Just to introduce myself, first of all, so as Sue says, my name's Dave Horton. I've been living in Ely and Cairo on the west of Cardiff for about 15 years, 16 years now. And I've helped set up an organisation called ACE, Action in Cairo and Ely. So we're based in Ely, a large housing estate of about 26,000 people on the west of Cardiff. Lots of challenges. I'm also a resident here, so I kind of come at this from two different perspectives, really. So one as a professional community development worker, and one as someone who lives and has brought up two daughters in Ely and Cairo, who've gone to local schools and are very much involved in the local community. So our journey really with ACE has been one from what we'd call now a deficit-based model. So approaching our community as, as a problem that needs solving by other people, and with professionals bringing their skills and working with local people to make a place better. And those of us who've been in Ely and Cairo for some time started to realise quite a few years ago that that was a problematic way of seeing our community. That actually, despite the challenges in Ely and Cairo, it's a place of enormous strength and potential and assets. So we became interested in this concept of asset-based community development. We kind of fell into it, really. We started noticing the strengths that people brought with them and felt that that was a better place to start in tackling some of the challenges that we face in our community. So, so really, got some experience of the kind of reality of asset-based community development. But having done it for so many years, I kind of become aware of the pitfalls and the frustrations as well. And there's two things really recently that have happened to kind of bring that home and bring a different kind of perspective on it all. One of them was you'll probably almost all of you, I suspect, would have seen the troubles that we faced in Ely in May of last year. It's almost exactly a year now since those troubles in Ely, following the tragic death of two young men from our community on e-bicycles, and then the kind of trouble that happened in our community after that. That was a devastating situation for our community, primarily because we lost two young lives, members of our community. But also, it was very difficult for those of us who have been involved for any length of time in working in our community. So the great story that gets associated with Ely and has done for years was the Ely Troubles in 1991, the Ely riots or the bread riots, um, and that was a story that became associated with our community that we've been trying to challenge ever since. And a lot of our work in our community through asset-based community development has been challenging stigma and trying to tackle that story that becomes associated with place and the impact that story has on people who live here. So, having done all that work, the devastation of having a similar incident kick off again in 2023 was very challenging for many of us. And then the second thing that happened is I've been involved for many years in quite a large community heritage project called Kaya Heritage, where we created a heritage centre and playground with local young people. And about a year ago, that playground was burnt down only about a year after we set it up. I'm not sure who did it. No one was found, but it was another kind of incident that really undermined um, that sense of positivity, and it had a quite a personal, profound personal impact on those of us who've been involved in the project. So today I'm coming at this from not a negative perspective at all, because we've had many successes and lots of very positive encouragements, but actually from a place of kind of a bit of a learned reality, a bit of difficult reality that's kind of kicked in and that we've had to deal with both as an organization and me personally. And I guess that from a personal point of view, after all these years living and working here, it came to a little bit of a crisis point around how I perceived what we were doing, and a little bit of kind of uh, hopelessness and a bit of kind of challenging emotions that came with it all. So today, what I'm hoping to do is take a little bit of a different angle and look at all this, because my thinking is that it's very easy to look at the theory and to kind of describe what asset-based community development should look like in practice. But actually, as soon as you start doing it for 5 minutes, there's a whole set of challenges and difficulties. And I'd like to try and move to a place today where we can be a bit real about that, and take that seriously and try and unpack it a little bit and understand it together. So I'm going to be taking a bit of a personal perspective on all this. Um, I want to dig beneath the glossy theory, and I want to sort of think about what it looks like and feels like in practice, and in particularly, what kind of people do we need to be to engage in asset-based community development to make it work, and what do we need to sustain us? Burnout is a big problem in our kind of work. Apparently, the average burnout rate, if you're in social and community type work, is about 6 or 7 years. Why is that, and how can we build a practice and a community together that supports each other so we can do this work for the long haul and sustain it over the long period? So it doesn't matter today whether you're involved in asset-based community development yourself, as a professional, or even if you're not directly involved in a community, because all of us live in communities. So bear that in mind when I'm asking you to discuss some issues later in the breakout groups. All of us have experience of community in some form. So I'm asking people to sort of bring their experience a little bit and involve yourselves in some conversations a little bit later on, just around how we might support each other and how we might sustain each other. So bear with me. It's a bit of an experiment. We're going to watch a video in a bit, and as I say, we're going to use one or two breakout groups. I'm even going to shockingly introduce a poem, and try and dig beneath the theory using a bit of poetry as well. So it's a little bit different. I'm hoping it'll go well. I just ask you to go with it and just share as much as you feel able to. No one's under any pressure to share anything deeply personal or anything like that. But we are talking about some of the challenges associated with ABCD as well. Does that all sound okay? I can't see you at the moment because it's gone to I'm just going to put you on gallery mode. There we go. Is everyone happy with that? I've got a thumbs up from Jessica. Brilliant. I'm going to share some slides. What I want to do at the beginning is just get a basic understanding of ABCD. So what I'm not going to do today is go into some great depth about ABCD or really unpack the theory. There's training you can do if that's of interest to people. I'm very happy to put my email address at the end if anyone wants to contact me to ask what kind of resources are available if you want to dig deeper into the theory. But I'm going to just make sure we kind of understand what we're talking about. So I share the screen. Can everyone see that? Cool. Okay, so you should be able to see a screen about asset-based community development. So the basic definition then of asset-based community development is that it builds on the assets that are found in the community and mobilizes individuals, associations, and institutions to come together to realize and develop their strengths. And as I've kind of tried to explain from a more personal perspective, it's very much in contrast with what we'd call a deficit model that approaches communities as problems that need solving by professionals. So it's looking for the skills and the assets and the opportunities and capacities that exist within communities. Coming from a place, a perception that every community has a unique set of skills and capacities that it can channel for community development. Every community is different, but all of them have something that you can build on to challenge and to create a good community that is able to tackle its challenges together. So within sort of ABCD theory, there's 5 different kind of puzzles to the puzzle pieces for the jigsaw. So the first one is individuals. So we believe that everyone has assets and gifts. So in ACE, what that looks like, our organization, is that we treat everyone as if they have something to contribute. That's our belief, that everybody has something unique to contribute. And if anyone is unable to contribute as a result, then everybody loses out because no one else can replace that unique contribution that person can make. The basic sort of organizational building block, if you like, of asset-based community development is associations. And within ABCD theory, that's small, fairly informal groups. They don't have to be kind of organized or constituted, but they're groups that bring people together around shared interests or shared gifts. So it's a place where people discover each other's gifts and where those gifts are embraced and kind of put to use in a friendly and social environment. So that's the basic kind of building block of any action through asset-based community development. You then have institutions. So these are described as people organized around assets. So our organization ACE, which I'll tell you a little bit more about in a minute, is an organization, an institution that organizes people around assets, okay? So in ACE, we've renovated and saved 2 community buildings, a big Dusty Forge pub on Cowbridge Road West, and an old gospel hall that we've turned into a community heritage centre at the foot of an Iron Age hill fort on the edge of our estate. And we also have a large piece of disused land in North Ely that we've been able to rescue and turn into a community garden. So we're able to take assets and organise people around them. We're able to employ staff, and we have some organising capacity to build on local energy and aspirations. So that's institutions, and they're fundamental to the model. And then there's place-based assets, which are things that we'd understand as the reason that a community has grown up around a place, physical assets. So that could be a river that provided opportunities for trade that became the basis of a town. Or the classic example would be a coal mine, I guess, where a community is built up around it because of the opportunities for employment. Now, that's obviously an opportunity if there's an asset, but it's also a threat if that asset becomes redundant. The obvious example being a mining community where the mine closes down. But nevertheless, any community exists where it is because of physical assets. So in our case, in Ely, we have extraordinary woodland around the edge. We have a river that runs through the estate. And we have, amazingly, an Iron Age hill fort, 2,000-year-old heritage site that we've been able to mobilise and involve local people in researching to tell a different story about their community and to create educational opportunities and scholarships for young people into university, and ultimately a heritage centre where we can celebrate our community story and challenge some of the stigmatising stories that exist around it. So that's a good example of a place-based asset that we've been able to organise people and associations around. And finally, is connections. Now, that's both a fundamental kind of part of the jigsaw puzzle that enables asset-based community development. So the connections that exist between people, but it's also the primary approach of asset-based community development. So those of you who know or are involved in asset-based community programs, they will often employ what we call community connectors, whose job it is to be out there connecting all these things together. So meeting individuals, building relationships, connecting them with local associations, connecting associations together, and connecting all these things to institutions and place-based assets so that they can together build community and tackle challenges. So connections is both a method, but also a kind of an outcome, if you like, of asset-based community development. So that's the basic building blocks of asset-based community development. It's not rocket science. The basic concept is that we've for too long approached communities as problems, and that actually any community, whilst it may have challenges, also has strengths that can be mobilized towards tackling those challenges. So the key quote that you might hear in relation to asset-based community development is working with what's strong and not what's wrong. And the key question that we're always trying to ask in our work in Ely and Cairo through ACE is, what can you contribute? So people may come with needs, and we will do everything we can to meet those needs. But our interest is, well, who are you as a person? What is it that gets you out of bed in the morning and inspires you? And what is it you can contribute so that all of us can share in the task of building community together? So our organisation has been built on those principles, and as a result, it's an organisation where local people are active throughout, as both participants, as staff. We employ lots of local people, about 40 staff. It's managed by local people as a board of trustees, and we have about 80, 90 volunteers at any one time. So the organisation is fundamentally built on the belief that local people have something to contribute. And as a result, it's a very empowering organisation for local people that can sustain community development work in our community over a long period, can bring in resources, and can mobilise local people towards regeneration in our community. So that's asset-based community development, and that's ACE, and that's all I want to say really about the theory of asset-based community development. I'm going to stop screen share in a second, just so I can see you and see if there's any questions. Has anyone got anything they want to ask or any comments? No? Okay, we'll move on. So what I'd like to do in a minute is show you a video, because I think what's really important for me today is that this isn't, in the end, sort of head stuff. There's stuff about the heart and about how we engage with people. It's about relationships. Okay, so all the theory in the world is great, but actually relationships aren't theoretical, they're practical and they're lived. So what I want to do is show you a video. It's only about 5 minutes, and it will help you feel, see and hear and feel what asset-based community development looks like in a particular setting of ACE, our organisation. And there's a few things I just want you, if you could scribble these down while you listen to me read them out. I'd like to be thinking about these when you look at the video, okay? Because after the video, we're going to put you into groups of 3 or 4, just to have a quick chat about what you picked up and what resonates with your own experience. So if you can be thinking about some particular themes. So one theme is reciprocity. So give and take, what does that look like in practice? What does it mean in the setting of a community of asset-based community development? So that's reciprocity. One is, what does it mean to be or stay in a place? How do we understand place? How do we experience place? And the third one is how can we create good shared spaces? So what does a really positive shared space look like? And how do we create that together? So if you can reflect on those while you're watching the video, I'm hoping you will then be able to go and have a fruitful chat about that afterwards, okay? So if people are ready, I'm going to try and show you this video. We have checked this. I'm hoping it'll work. Any problems, please raise your hand and just let me know if you can't hear it or can't see it. But for 5 minutes, have a bit of a relax, sit back, sip your tea, and hopefully enjoy this video. Right, let me try again.
We are working with people to harness the...
Sorry, everyone. I think I realised what's happening. It's when I put my mic on mute that it stops. So I won't do that again now. Should be okay now. Sorry, everyone.
We are working with people to harness their skills so they can bring about a positive change in their lives. So, you know, that focus on what we do is about what they are able to do for themselves, but we're a conduit for that.
Sorry, I'll try once more.
We're working with people to harness their skills so they can bring about a positive change in their lives. So, you know, that focus on what we do is about what they are able to do for themselves, but we're a conduit for that.
At ACE, the way we work is just as important as the things we do. What we discover from being here long term is that people are full of skills and gifts and contributions that they can make that have been neglected and ignored for too long. So we try and work with people to identify, nurture and celebrate those skills and unique gifts, and to put them to work so that everyone locally can benefit. And we often say that everyone has something to contribute, and if anyone can't contribute for any reason, then everybody loses out as a result. One thing we really hope ACE does is holds up a vision of what our community could be like, something that people can rally around and get behind and put their own efforts and energy into.
I think where ACE is strongest is a two-way relationship between people. People get stuff from us as an organisation, but they also give, and I think those kind of relationships, I think, form the heart of what we're about. People are taking those leadership roles. I think that's where, for me, that's when I feel most kind of excited and alive at work. Is when I'm thinking, look how far that person has come.
ACE is like the draw. Whatever you've got going on in your life, you go into the draw, you come into ACE, and you take out what you need. And you might even like it that much that you put something back in the draw. Put a bit of volunteering back into it, innit?
Yeah.
ACE is the community. We're not kind of a separate organisation that's flown in and just does stuff. At the heart are the members of the community and what their vision and aspiration and desire for change is, and building on that. We can facilitate that movement for positive change, because it doesn't necessarily happen by itself unless you've got a place that people can come together, because I think that's what ACE provides.
It's really important for us that when people walk into our spaces, they feel welcome, ensuring that they can come exactly as they are, bringing all their strengths and needs and everything in between.
When people are feeling they can be their whole self somehow, they can, they can be creative, or they can ask for help, or they can contribute. The place, the space, the welcome, that's the kind of glue which makes it all work.
When people come to us with problems with money or mental health or other issues, we understand, because many of us have been there ourselves.
And also, if I'm feeling down or I've got financial issues, I know that there's people in here. It's keeping me occupied, I'm learning new skills. I've met all these new friends, which I'd never. I mean, if I'd seen Tasha on the street, I would just walk straight past her. I wouldn't make friends.
And I didn't even know that we lived like around the corner from each other. Yeah, we're genuine people doing things that we not that we have to do. We just like. We wake up in the morning and that's what we do.
But it's also nice to see when you help someone, isn't it?
I look forward to actually waking up in the morning and helping people.
We're always looking for the talent, skills and experience of the people we work with. We also recognise that everyone needs support to thrive. So we work holistically, offering support and creating opportunities that take into account the whole person.
We have a lot of people in grief space that just pop in for other things, and they mentioned, especially if it's like they're going through a financial crisis, but sometimes it is because of bereavement, and they come in trying to get some support with that. They'll start having a chat with somebody, you'll get to the reason of why it's happened, and then they're like, oh, okay, well, I'll pop along. And we've had people that come for months now, and their life is completely different, but that wasn't the reason they came here in the beginning.
Come in here and you do, even to just meet one person and you start talking to that person, it's the best thing you ever do. And you want to try out, and then you might come in here to do art. And before long, you're doing, lots of different things.
All the other classes going on.
And then,
like they got
and
crochet.
And then you find out about the Heritage Centre, and all the activities over there, and you start meeting people.
And then a year down the line, you're actually volunteering.
One of the important things about ACE is that we're here for the long haul. We want to be here long enough to be able to accompany people on a journey. We want to be here in 10, 20, 30 years' time, something that's long-term, that people who are young now will still value and recognise and celebrate and contribute to in the future.
Because obviously that's played a big role in my life, of ACE youth people being there for me. I just want to pass that down to people who need it as well. So without ACE, we wouldn't have been able to do all this. We wouldn't have been able to help these kids. We're like teaching them some of that like important life skills, which they've done to us. I'm like really thankful for the opportunities that ACE has actually given us. So hopefully when I turn 16 now, I'm hoping to volunteer in ACE.
We work with people on their own terms, both because they deserve nothing less, but also because in our experience, that's what works. So we co-produce everything we do depending on who's in the room and the unique contributions they bring.
We just let people be who they are and help them to become what they want to be and do it naturally. It's organic. It's not, you know, the tick box theories there, but it's how do we capture the practical that goes on.
We're more community-based, so we work in a strengths-based approach as well. So we don't just have people just come through the door and we work for them. We work like with them and see what we can do together.
Okay, hopefully everyone could see and hear that in the end. I apologise for the problems at the beginning. I didn't realise you couldn't, I couldn't use the other functions on Zoom because it stopped the video from working. Hopefully that's giving you a feel for what asset-based community development kind of feels and looks like in practice. What do these relationships look like? How do they impact on people? What do people give and take to that relationship to sustain them and make them work? And you'll started to pick up the kind of long-term impact of being in a community where you're getting to know young people who then later on come and invest themselves in the organisation. So what I'd like people to do now, we're going to break out. I don't want this to be all me speaking. I've been asked to run a kind of workshop really. So I'm hoping that this is an opportunity to discuss some of what you picked up from the film and the things that have resonated with you, particularly from the film and in the context of your own work. So I'm hoping that I can have some small kind of fairly informal, friendly chats in three, find out a little bit about each other and what you're up to and your role. But then if you could have a think about the following questions, you might have to take a note of these. The main one is what resonated with you from the film or inspired you. So have a chat about that. And then if you'd like to get onto this, you could think about reciprocity. So that issue that I raised just before we watched the film. What do we bring to the table ourselves? What do we need? And how do we hold this in balance as professionals or community members? And then if you have time, if you're really keen to move on, then relationships provide the soil in which good things grow. So how can we create shared spaces where relationships can flourish? So if you make a note of those things for a couple of minutes, I'm also going to share in the chat box a link to a Google Doc where the questions are on as well, just in case anyone wants to open that up. So there you go, that's there. If you'd like to open that, that'll have just 3 slides on it, and we'll be on the first slide for this question. But don't feel the need to do that. You can make a note of the questions now, and I'll also just broadcast them into the groups as we go along. And you've got just 15 minutes, so spend a couple of minutes introducing yourselves. Start to chat about what resonated with you or inspired you, and then move on to the other questions if you think that's something you would like to do and would be useful. And then we're just going to have sort of 5 or 10 minutes when we get back just to post 1 or 2 key things that stood out for you as a group, either in the chat box or I'll ask you to raise your hands. Does that sound okay? Is everyone happy? I'm going to stop sharing. Has anyone got anything they would like to, anything that stood out from their conversation they'd like to share, either in the chat box or just pop your hand up?
Can I?
Yeah, go on, Jessica.
I
Great.
put it in the chat, but in fact, Bethan was trying to show me how to get out of just being able to chat with individuals, and I've not managed it yet. So I'll speak. No, we thought that the film was extremely positive, and what came through very strongly was that sense of people who perhaps joined because they had particular needs, but how they seemed to have pride in place and to feel that they were making a contribution to the community, and the pleasure that gave them, and actually the sort of connectedness that was coming about as a result of it. And it was really uplifting. That was a part of our discussion, but I'm sure that my other lovely group members will add to that.
Yeah, thanks. So 2 crucial things there. People's connection with each other is fundamental, but also people's sense that they can change things, that their contribution is valuable and is taken up and celebrated by a community. We find that that's transformational for people. The times we see real change for people is when they find their own contribution celebrated and find their place in the community where they're valued and they have something to contribute. And that is life-changing for both people and their families. I think Jessica had a hand up. Jessica, do you want to say something?
Yeah, I just wanted to sort of say for the group really, I think what resonated with us was, that there was, a deep sense of community space, but it's also owned by the community and the workers were from the community. I think that's a real positive. But I think we did sort of look at some. I know Keith was talking about his working as a charity, but like it sort of grows on its own, and sometimes you've got to sort of pull back and think, oh gosh, please. I hope it's going to be okay, that whatever they're doing, I hope it's going to be okay, and it usually is. But then there were 4 of us then in the room that were professionals in one way or another, academic or doing some charities, etc. And knowing really how to step in and step out with our own agendas. We're probably getting paid to do to communities, but knowing how to do it when you're not actually part of that community, and question really is whether you can do an asset-based approach when you're going in because of deficit.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Real challenges there. And someone else in the comments has said sharing their skills and giving back benefits the individual more than receiving a service. And yet some of us are involved in where we're providing a service. So that is a challenge in terms of how we take some of the values and practices of asset-based community development. And I think one of the things I was talking to Sue about recently is that the danger with that, anything really, any theory, but ABCD particularly, is we're kind of purist about it, that we have some absolute utopian vision of what it could be. But I think it's a set of values and a way of looking at a community as much as anything. And I do believe it's possible for people in a more traditional sort of service delivery place to approach the community with that kind of pair of glasses on, if you like. And I think that's the key. It's not really a rule book or it's a set of glasses through which you look at the world. I was interested in your kind of, I think you mentioned it was your someone in your group, Keith. So I can see there Keith's comments about the sort of the risks of letting people take control. There's that sense of a slight lack of control in it. Keith, did you want to comment?
Yeah, I think with some of the more recent things we've done, they've almost been done as sort of like small associations that are of a sort of separate identity from the charity, and that obviously can make the trustees nervous that it's not we've not got the same control. These are not volunteers who are towing our line. These are people who have their own idea of how things should be done. So yeah, there's a bit more of a scary nature to it, I think, compared to the way things have been done in the past. But it seems to be much more energizing, and people have a sense of ownership. So our pantry, for instance, has its own committee that from amongst the members who decide how most things should happen. And there's only a small number of things where the charity feels that it might need to have a bit of a say, but for the most part, it's run by the members, and that's great, and it gives them a lot of energy and sense of ownership, and seems to be working well. And seeing how we can replicate that with other little groups.
Thanks, Keith. That's great. I think that what I picked up from you is this issue of it's about control, isn't it? And our sense, much of what we have in place in our working life, professional boundaries, policies, and all this sort of stuff are about enabling us to feel some level of control and safety. And that's a very difficult, challenging aspect in all this, I think. There's lots of questions we ask all the time in our organisation about how we maintain appropriate relationships and how we create a context where this can happen, whilst also taking those issues seriously. Because there is a certain amount of ceding control to people and risks associated with that. So that was really, I think, quite pertinent. There's a comment in the chat box, connections, and that this was happening across generations as well. I got a sense that people felt that they belonged there and that they were understood. Yeah, one of the really exciting things for me recently has been we've employed some local people who have known ACE since they were kids at school. They got involved in the Heritage Project whilst they were at school, and they wanted to work for ACE and came and applied for jobs and have ended up working with us. And there is a real thrill in sort of being somewhere long enough to see that happen, and to see that sort of intergenerational change happen. Before we move on, has anyone got anything else that they're burning, hoping to sort of say and share before we move on? Anything else that stood out? Anything else about the tensions that exist for us as professionals? If not, we're going to pick this up anyway. So. Okay, I think we're on time, so we're going to move on. It's probably quite a good time to move on. So all I wanted to start thinking about now is what happens when it doesn't work out as we plan it to. So this is a problem with any theory, isn't it? So the theories are kind of written sometimes in a vacuum, and they look great on paper. And you maybe go and study them at college when you're young and still full of hope and vision and optimism, and it all sounds great. And then you head off into the real world to put it into practice. And within about 5 minutes, you realize things are a bit trickier than maybe they'd been made out to be. Because ultimately, communities are messy places full of challenges. And ultimately, human nature is a bit messy, isn't it? And maybe even we ourselves are a little bit messy. So what do we do when that happens? And how do we continue? How do we stay in a place? And how do we carry it well when things get difficult? And I'm sort of executing a bit of a one-person campaign to look beyond theory. And one of the ways of doing that, I think, is to actually use creative skills and creative activities like art, poetry, storytelling. Humans are storytelling creatures. For most of our history, we've sat around fires making sense of the world by telling stories. And it's a strange modern phenomenon that so much of our thinking is, I forget which is the left and right brain. I'm not sure there are people here who know which one I'm talking about, but we sort of fail to use the creative side of our brains. We have a very sort of rationalist approach to these things. And actually, when things go wrong, that doesn't always work out so well. So I'm going to share one in the spirit of storytelling. I'm going to share a story of a colleague of mine called Caroline. Let me just get the slides going again. Oh. So Caroline's in the middle there. That's a drawing of her. And Caroline was one of those wonderful stories that we celebrate, and I kind of hinted at earlier, someone whose life is really transformed by their experiences in their community. When we first met Caroline, she was the mother of a 12-year-old daughter. She had very severe mental health problems and was basically stuck in the home being cared for by her daughter. She had suffered a relationship breakdown and hadn't really recovered. And she was dragged along by a 12-year-old daughter initially to a litter pick, I think, in the community. And the really embarrassing thing is that we used to run a time credit program where we'd pay time credits for your involvement in the community. And Caroline earned her first time credit. And whenever she shared this story for years, she would tell people that I gave her no information about what it was or what she should do with it. And it sat in a drawer for 10 years until someone found it 10 years later. And I always came out terribly badly at this story. It was rather embarrassing. But Caroline, through that, started to engage in her community. She started coming more regularly, and with time, we discovered that she had this extraordinary gift of hospitality. She was a good cook, and she loved to welcome people. And she started volunteering with us, and ended up setting up our first food pantry. And before long, Caroline applied for a job with us, and she worked with us for about 3 or 4 years, setting up our food pantry, and ultimately got quite a good position in the organisation, running a lot of our food and hospitality related work. Now, during COVID, very, very sadly, Caroline had a stroke towards the beginning of COVID, not connected to COVID, and she died a week later. And it was absolutely devastating for the ACE team. She had very close friends in the team, people who were neighbours and had known her for years. So we were left with this question of, well, what do we do? The organisation will never be the same again. There'll be a hole in it now forever, a scar, if you like, in the organisation. How do we carry this in a way that enables us to bear it and hold it and to carry on, but also to kind of keep Caroline's legacy alive and keep her spirit, keep her with us, if you like? How can we continue journeying with Caroline and with her legacy? So we've used a lot of artistic approaches to do that. We've used, you see on the left there, that's a installation, a piece of art that we made as a team with our community artists that kind of expressed our memories of Caroline and the things that we loved about her and the things we miss about her. On the bottom right there, these stars that we got from the crochet knit and natter team, and inside them are sort of thoughts and memories and prayers for Caroline that people are able to leave, and they hang up in the shed in our back garden at the community centre. And finally, we've kind of set up the volunteers set up a cafe bar. Caroline's surname was Bar, in memory of her, and we serve food in her name still, and feed people and make sure that they're able to eat. So we've sort of found these creative ways of taking Caroline with us into the future, and refusing to let her go, and of kind of holding the challenges and the grief and the pain, but holding it well and turning it into something positive. And I think the role of creativity in that has been absolutely fundamental. So we're going to spend a little bit of time actually putting our money where our mouth is, and we're going to use a poem to reflect on some of these themes. Okay, I'm going to stop sharing. So I want us to start thinking about what do we do when things get difficult? How do we stay in a place? How do we carry the challenges, but in a way that is real but positive? And how do we maybe even turn some of those challenges and some of that pain into something positive, and kind of regenerate it into something that can help build community in the way that we've managed to do with Caroline? So we're going to try and actually we're going to read a poem and see what you kind of make of it. So I'm hoping this works out all right for people. Has anyone heard of the poet Wendell Berry? Yeah, Keith has. Okay, so if you haven't read Wendell Berry, I highly recommend him. He's an essay writer and a poet and short story writer, and he's very much writes about place. He's a writer, but he's also a farmer in Kentucky, and is interested in how we connect to the land and how we live in a place well, in keeping with the needs of the community around us and the neighborhood, but also the natural environment. So I'm going to read a poem by Wendell Berry, and then I'm going to share some questions for you to think about. And what I'll do is I'll share them while I read the poem, and then we're just for 10 minutes going to go back into our breakout groups just to think about some of these issues, using the poem as a kind of way into those issues, and a way of maybe understanding them a bit better. This is the poem, so I'm going to read it, and then I'll move on to the questions. And again, if you take a note of the questions, and you'll know what we were discussing, we'll broadcast them into the group again. So sit back, relax, and I'm going to read you a poem. So this is Wendell Berry, The Sycamore. In the place that is my own place, whose earth I am shaped in and must bear, there is an old tree growing, a great sycamore that is a wondrous healer of itself. Fences have been tied to it, nails driven into it, hacks and whittles cut into it, the lightning has burned it. There is no year it has flourished in that has not harmed it. There is a hollow in it that is its death, though its living brims whitely at the lip of the darkness and flows outward. Over all its scars has come the seamless white of the bark. It bears the gnarls of its history healed over. It has risen to a strange perfection in the warp and bending of its long growth. It has gathered all accidents into its purpose. It has become the intention and radiance of its dark fate. It is a fact, sublime, mystical, and unassailable. In all the country there is no other like it. I recognize in it a principle, an indwelling, the same as itself and greater, that I would be ruled by. I see that it stands in its place and feeds upon it, and is fed upon it, and is native and maker. So you'll pick up, this is the kind of theme that Wendell Berry covers in lots of his poems. And if you've opened the link, if you have been able to open the link in the chat box, you can see the poem there. And these are the questions that I thought would be interesting to think about. So again, what in the poem resonates with you? What stands out? What might it mean for us to stand in our place? Despite the challenges and despite the hardships? And what might it mean, this line stood out to me, to gather all accidents into a purpose. And then finally, just use that to move into a conversation about how we sustain ourselves in the work that we do in communities. What works for you? How do you sustain yourself? What gives you life? What gives you hope? What keeps you going when it's hard? And what do you do with the difficult things to be able to keep going? Does that all make sense? I'll give it another minute just to scribble some things down. If you've got the link open, then you'll be able to see both the poem and the questions. Otherwise, I will post the questions into the broadcast again, and we'll just give this 10 minutes. We may do a little bit of feedback. We'll see how we get on for time. People got captured the questions? I'm going to stop sharing. I'm going to make sure everyone's happy again. I know this is a bit unusual. I'm hoping it works. Is everyone happy to go and have a conversation and see how you get on? And I'll be excited to hear how you find it. Okay, Kelly, I think when we're ready, we're going to go into the same groups because you started getting to know each other a little bit. Hi, everyone. Welcome back. I always think it's a good sign if people don't come straight back as soon as the breakout group closes. So that's encouraging. There's I've got about 10 minutes. I'm going to wind up, and I've got just a few thoughts to share at the end, just some key themes that I think we should be thinking about. But would anyone like to feedback any thoughts from their discussions? Anything that stood out or kind of resonated or inspired them or challenged them? Any thoughts, either in the chat box again or in person?
I think, as you rudely ripped us out of that meeting, Melis was given a really good example of use of poetry with her, was it son-in-law with a GP?
Well, it was my friend's son. He's in Cardiff University as a medical student. And so they had somebody's body that they were using for training purposes. And they had to write a poem to the family of the person who donated their body for that purpose.
Wow.
Yeah, so I think from my friend, his mum's sort of interpretation of it was that, they couldn't just write something really quick, like a quick email or something. They had to put a lot of thought into what they wanted to say, what they wanted to convey to the family, but really think about that person as a person.
Yeah, so it's a totally different way about of thinking and communicating about it. Yeah, that's a really interesting example. Thank you. There's a comment here. I'll scroll back up. Marie and Roz, nature and how many things can't be planned. Tell us a bit more.
I was just thinking about those accidents that have purpose. It just, and I think an accident is something that just kind of happened, might not have been planned for or expected, but actually when working with people, and they might not have even known about it or noticed it, but then all this amazing stuff can happen, but it's not necessarily going to happen in a certain order or a certain way, because nobody, especially those hidden talents and that person that you have never met before and then pops in, has just added to like the ecosystem of it. So. Yeah,
I think that line I think is one of the most profound in the poem. The idea of take it, I can't remember what it is, gathering all accidents into purpose. Yeah, I think that's very profound. Yeah, and I think there's a creativity in being able to engage with that. How do you confront an accident and see it as an opportunity potentially? That's really helpful. Thanks both. So Connor, so we talked about the metaphor. Perhaps the tree symbolises a community and its spirit that survives even as people come and go over generations. Oh, I like it. I hadn't thought about it like that. Connor, do you want to say anything more about that?
Oh, thanks, Steve. I know maybe we looked into it a bit too much, but no, I think it was just a good poem, though, just to sort of, I thought it just symbolised, how a community, and especially about the how things can't be planned. I thought that was quite a good take, because when you think about nature, nothing, when there's no human intervention, is you find trees, they grow because the seeds get blown around in the wind, things pop up as and when. So maybe we could think about that as well in terms of how our people in our communities can sort of organically sort of grow into these types of groups and initiatives rather than it being sort of pushed. But like if we could create that sort of comfortable and welcoming space in sort of community buildings, things like that, people can come and sort of bring their own. If there is an issue, maybe people will naturally then come and use those spaces to sort of do those things together, rather than it being dictated to or being rather than there being some like a set agenda. Gives them at least that creativity then, and there's no sort of boundaries.
I think that's really helpful. And it's about that control thing again, isn't it? Stepping back and letting things grow. A gardener doesn't make things grow; they create the environment where something can thrive and grow. And to a certain extent, they have to step back and let nature take its course. I think that's quite powerful. I hadn't really thought about it intergenerationally, but I think almost certainly Wendell Berry would be thinking it like that, because he does a lot of work around places over long periods of time, and how people connect to it in their time. So that was really helpful. Thank you. Kelly said so there's a message from Kelly about feedback from today. So Lucy said it symbolized how even when things break or change, they're still beautiful and resilient, similar to butterflies. Kelly, do you want to say anything? Lucy, do you want to say anything more about that? Or?
Yeah, my friends laugh at me because I've always got a quote or something when they have a bad time. I've always got a quote or a saying or a poem. But I do think it's true. You look at things that break, they're still beautiful. Doesn't mean that just because something's changed that it's not, it's better or it's worse. It's evolving, isn't it? And that tree has evolved through all that life has thrown at it, and it's still beautiful and strong.
Yeah, and I think there's something about embracing the fragile. And fragile people make up a lot of the people that we're spending our time with. But yeah, it's about embracing everyone in their diversity and in their fragility. I'm going to comment on that again in a minute because there's something important I think we need to touch on before we leave. So anything else? I've got a few more things to share before I hand back over to Sue, but has anyone else got anything to share that they wanted to kind of mention from that conversation? How did you find talking about it? I was a bit nervous about this session. I haven't asked people to do anything like this before. It does feel a little bit kind of a little bit risky because you're trying to connect on a slightly different level than we usually do. So please do feed back to Kelly because I would love to know if this has worked and if it's something I should pursue and do more of. Because it's really about connecting on a bit of a different level than we usually do. I'm just going to close with some thoughts of my own about some things that I think we should be thinking about, and many of them have come up, which is what I had hoped. So I think some of the things we should go away from this and maybe reflect on. So the significance of place and being in a place. So how do we stand like the tree? How do we stand in our place? What does that mean to do that over the long period of time, and how do we deal with the implications of that, both positive and negative? I think obviously a key theme in the poem is the importance of the natural world and our place in it, and I increasingly find it important to feel connected to the place that I live in and the surrounding area in terms of the nature and connecting with that and feeling that I'm part of that. Obviously, fundamental to asset-based community development is a giving and receiving and the uniqueness of people's contribution. And I think that comes out in the poem as well. I think it talks about the uniqueness of the tree. There's no other like it in all the land, So let's celebrate our own uniqueness, but let's find ways of celebrating other people's as well. How do we live well in community as both native and maker? So I think sometimes if we're in a professional role, we don't think of ourselves as people who take something away from that and need something from it. But that's not how it works in community. We both receive and we give in community, and thinking about that dynamic in terms of what we need and what we bring, I think is really important and is fundamental to a sort of asset-based approach, but also to us thriving in our own places and being able to stay. And related to that, what kinds of values do we need, and what kind of people do we need to be? How do we build resilience, patience? How do we practice compassion and love and all those things that build community? So I think asset-based community development is a values-based approach. But what do we need as personal values to sustain us in it and to do the work that we need to do? And I think I'm going to edge into this because this is a bit of I think one of the themes of the poem is that our own vulnerabilities and failures can actually can play a role in helping us connect with others. And in a way, our vulnerabilities can be as much assets as our strengths. And the reason for that is I think people struggle to connect with or to understand people they perceive to have it all together. That feeling when someone seems to have all their stuff together and know exactly what they're doing and be super confident. There's something about vulnerability that can connect you to other people, and I think that's a key theme in the poem. That the vulnerabilities become part of the story and an important part of the kind of the offer that is made within the setting that it's in. So I think that's worth thinking about. What does that mean in practice? To what extent are we happy to share some of those vulnerabilities, and what would that look like in an appropriate way, either as professionals or as people who live in our communities? But I think that's something that's worth more conversation, and I'll just throw out there. And then finally, what do we need to sustain us? Is it time, solitude, silence, nature, friends, sport? How do we keep going? What do we need ourselves, and how do we sustain ourselves and each other? So I'm hoping that's something that I think it's something we should be talking about more in the work that we do. This is kind of culture, a little bit of giving and giving and giving until you burn out. But actually, what's a sustainable way of engaging with our communities, and what do we need in terms of give and take? I'm going to stop sharing. It's exactly 26 minutes past 3, and that gives Sue 4 minutes to to wrap up.
Thank you, Dave. And I definitely don't need 4 minutes, but just to give a few concluding remarks. I want to, on your behalf, thank Dave very much for an excellent workshop. First workshop in our series of events, so that was very welcome to have more chance to interact with each other. Some great examples from ACE and from film and poetry to reflect on ABCD, and it was a very different angle and useful angle to take, so that we can reflect on, you know, personal thoughts and experience in, you know, tackling some of the challenges actually that we face. So that was very welcome, Dave. I'd like to thank on your behalf Kelly for all her support. Please do complete the evaluation form and sign up for our next session, which is about evidence and the role of universities in supporting communities. Finally, thank you very much, everybody, for attending. I look forward to seeing you again. And Dave, do put your number in if you haven't already in the chat to make sure that people can connect with you.
I put my email address, if that's all right, Sue. So
Yeah,
please do.
yeah,
Please,
because
please
I'm sure there
contact
are
me.
people. Yeah, there are.
I'd be pleased to hear from you. Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you very much, everybody, and enjoy the rest of your afternoon, and hopefully the sunshine and warmth where you are. I know there is in Denbighshire, but in many other places there are. So thank you very much, everybody, and take care.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.